Thanks, Scott, for the kind introduction, and welcome everybody to our webinar about delivering an Agile enterprise. Before we get going, just a little bit about Sparx Services North America. I'll let you guys read through the gory details, but the highlights are we're members and contributors to a number of different industry standards organizations, including various formal modeling specifications at the object management groups such as UML, SysML, UAF, and other multi-letter acronyms. Also contribute to a couple of architecture communities at the Open Group around the TOGAF standard, the Archimate specification, and the IT for IT reference architecture. We also participate at the Business Architecture Guild, where we create the BizBock Guide, a guide to the business architecture body of knowledge, contributing to the UML profile and meta model teams, and more recently have joined the TM Forum, working in a number of their architecture standards. I'd like to start the discussion by taking a step back and just talking a little bit about just what do we mean by agility, particularly at the enterprise and business level. So, of course, we're all familiar with Agile software delivery, and that's a great, wonderful thing when it's done effectively. But we're talking about, how can we enable the entirety of the organization to be Agile? And we reference a definition of business agility that we borrowed from Gartner, where business agility is defined as the ability of an organization to sense environmental change and to respond efficiently and effectively to that change. And of course, if you went to any of your executives and said, hey, what do you think about us being agile from a business perspective? And you shared this definition with them, I'd be surprised if they would respond with, no, we would just as soon be completely oblivious to the things that are going on within our organization and in our market with our customers and our products. And when a change happens, we'd just as soon be responding to it, very late and, tripping over us and struggling with how to respond best. So of course, who wouldn't want to be agile at an enterprise level. But in order to effectively deliver upon that agility, it really requires the business to understand a number of different things, including what motivates the business, how does the business behave, how does the business fit together, and then once we've got a good idea of that, it's going to be much more effective and appropriate to talk about how well does technology support the business and its strategy. So the first step is to understand what motivates the business. Is there a shared common understanding of the mission and vision of the business? Do we know what the current business goals and objectives are? And are those objectives quantified and measurable? Do we understand what types of factors inside and outside of our organization are driving the business to change what it does and how it does it? Which constraints govern our motivation and the policies that influence our culture? And more importantly, are these motivation factors, prioritized and correlated to one another into a coherent strategic plan across the entirety of the enterprise down to different business unit and product teams? Then, after we understand the motivation of the business, we want to understand how the business behaves. So do we have a good understanding of who our customers are, suppliers and partners? What are our externally facing value streams? What kind of events does the business have to respond to? And how do people and systems internally collaborate to fulfill those external service requests? And what kind of security and regulatory policies govern behavior? The next step is to understand how the different parts of the business fit together. Beginning with, what are your internal business capabilities? How does each capability integrate with one another? What are the handoffs and touch points? What kind of information and data is shared between capabilities to support the business? How is the business organized, particularly in the context of a overall business ecosystem? Who is the owner of particular processes and the steward of common data? So after we understand what motivates the business, how the business behaves, and how the different parts of the business fit together, then we're in a much better position to understand how technology supports the business. And we want to start with having an idea of how much money we've invested in technology. Perhaps even more important than that is what are we getting out of it. And so this is pretty similar to the idea that we all are interested in investing in a retirement portfolio, but as our lives change and things evolve and we want to switch things around, it's pretty hard to make informed decisions about how we might want to adjust that if we don't understand what we're getting out of our current investments in the first place. So, the kind of things that we want to be able to respond to is what might be the impact of a change to a business process, to our existing applications. Are there business processes that are supported by multiple and possibly redundant applications? Do we know what kind of data is shared between applications and the processes they're supporting? What would the impact be on an application going down on upstream and downstream applications and the business processes they support? Do we know what our business critical functions are, and are they supported by commensurate, highly available application and technology platforms? Do we know which applications run on which technology platforms, and what would the impact be of a change in security requirements, like a new regulation or statute, on our existing systems and networks? And all of these in this and the preceding slides are examples of what we call stakeholder concerns, and they're general purpose questions that many businesses are interested in knowing the answers to help make, again, informed decisions about how to evolve their investments. One of the best practices that we've identified is it's often appropriate to recast some of the popular approaches and best practices for taking an architecture-driven approach towards defining strategy and delivering upon that. And if we look at some of the popular frameworks out there, such as the TOGAF standard or the BizBach guide, they've got a lot of good content that informs the architecture community, how to do what they need to do to, collect good information, requirements, put together good plans. But one of the things we want to be mindful about is that, many of those standards have been written by architects for architects, so they often don't use language that resonates with some of our executive decision makers. So what we've done is really taking the best of all of those things and pulled it into a value stream, which is what you're seeing here on this slide, that represents how an executive team desires improved stakeholder value, whether that's the shareholders and customers of a publicly traded company or the constituents of a government organization or nonprofit, and that our position is that, well, what they want to do to deliver upon that value proposition is to deliver upon strategic outcomes. And in this value stream, we've decomposed it into 6 discrete value stream stages. The first 3 is what we call strategy at rest. When we're thinking about strategy, so we're doing things like analyzing the competitive landscape and our current state capabilities and strategy, then using that information to define a new strategy and key initiatives, and then assess the viability and impact of that on our enterprise. And and this, of course, is where we would do significant amounts of business and enterprise architecture work. But the more important thing is then moving on to the next group of stages, which is strategy in motion, where we're planning how we're going to deliver our initiatives, implement our new solutions through our solution delivery process, and then put those solutions into operation. And one thing that's not shown on this particular diagram, just because of density of content, is that it's important to have a feedback loop from the operate stage back to the beginning of the value stream, so that we can monitor outcomes and establish a feedback loop to make sure that we're realizing the benefits that we promised in the initial strategy. And as we aspire to be more effective at planning, decision making, and delivery, we do want to be mindful that organizations do tend to go through several different maturity stages as they try to evolve their capabilities. And we just need to establish a solid foundation at one level before we're really prepared to take advantage of that and go to the next level. So a lot of organizations start with technology consolidation, trying to reduce the overproliferation of divergent and conflicting technologies. And then once that's in place, then we're in a better position to rationalize our application portfolio, where we want to remove redundant and overlapping software applications and ones that are perhaps expensive and risky to operate. And then that provides a good foundation to move to the next stage, where we're trying to optimize our business by improving, the efficiency of our operating model through tweaking processes. And then once we've done that, we're in a really awesome position to then be able to deliver enterprise agility, through business digital transformation initiatives, where we have seamless integration between business and IT. An important part of being able to deliver an agile enterprise is to have an agreed upon strategy across the enterprise of the different kinds of information that we need to keep track of in order to inform our plans and decision making. And to do that, what we really want to do is think about what are the different kinds of content that we need to keep track of. What are their properties and what are their relationships? And we want to design this, intentionally and deliberately to address this example stakeholder concerns that we talked about at the beginning. And so we think of this as as really kind of like a chart of accounts, at least when we talk to the non-architect community, that, for example, in an accounting system, if you got a whole bunch of people processing invoices and payments and all that sort of stuff, it's really important to have an agreed upon chart of accounts on where to post different types of transactions so that you can roll that information up and produce useful financial statements. So of course, many of you will recognize this as what we call in the architecture profession an architecture meta model, and the example that I'm showing here is a high-level view of one that we've put together for the telecommunications industry, although a great deal of it could also be applied to virtually any kind of business. Another important dimension is to really understand what kind of content across the enterprise might already exist that we can exploit. Because in many organizations, there's a lot of good information spread out across the enterprise, but often the business is not in a good position to really exploit that for its own benefit. So there are some compelling features within Sparx Enterprise Architect, namely server-based plugins or SBPI features, and then the model flow ETL tool that we've created for doing more batch loading of information into a centralized architecture repository. But we might have, application server and network information in a CMDB that might be useful for various impact analysis scenarios. There might be other modeling tools and repositories across the enterprise. There might be specific tools we're using for managing agile software development projects like Jira. There may be tools that we're using for managing programs and projects, or how we're tracking and reporting IT finance as it relates to application and infrastructure investments and project spend. There's also, some operational systems around our business, such as HR systems, and then, of course, general purpose databases and files that might contain useful information. And so the ability to pull that all together, based on, a strategy that we saw earlier, is a great way to really harness all of this content for the greater benefit of the organization as a whole. So what we have to offer from our perspective is really a complete lifecycle solution. So if we start with the prospects of using the BizBot guide as the basis for our business architecture, where we are going to describe our value streams, organization structure, and overall business ecosystem, our business capabilities and information, and other dimensions such as product policy, initiatives, stakeholders, and strategy. We can then take that information to provide context for describing our operating model using OMG standards such as BPMN, DMN for decision modeling, and something that's not on this slide, CMMN, the case management modeling notation. And while certainly Archimate does have the capabilities for supporting the business architecture, if we're going to use a hybrid approach, we often look at Archimate providing a great foundation for the IT architecture, then looking to use UML for solution architecture and business analysis requirements management. And we've also developed a API management solution based on Enterprise Architect as well, And the benefit of being able to pull all this together using fit-for-purpose languages based on a custom approach based on our stakeholder concerns is we're able to deliver an end-to-end perspective all the way from strategy to solution. We've created an integrated knowledge base where our diverse set of stakeholders are all informed. And most importantly, this really leads us to the ability to sustain agility. Namely the ability to do instantaneous impact analysis, where we can go into our repository, run what-if analysis types of scenarios, and come out of that very rapidly with a high level of confidence that the information that we've extracted is credible and believable and useful for informed decision making. All right, so now that we've kind of provided a big picture for some of the concepts and principles of what it means to deliver an agile enterprise, I'm going to flip over to Enterprise Architect and give you a quick tour of some of the kind of content, particularly focusing on the strategy and the business architecture using the BizBock UML profile that we've created.